The year is 2021. The air smells of wet clay and diesel fuel. A crew stands beside a half-finished bridge abutment. They are staring at a problem. A 40-ton concrete piling. It is sunk deep in the Ohio mud. Sunk at the wrong angle. The ground is soft from a week of rain. Their crane, a Liebherr LTM 1070, sits idle. Its yellow boom is a monument to frustration. The machine is worth $340,000. It has a lifting capacity of 77 tons. On paper, it should be easy, but the angle is wrong. The outriggers sink into the saturated earth. Every attempt to pull just digs the piling deeper. The foreman, a young engineer named David, checks his tablet. He runs the calculations again. The physics are clear. The reality is stubborn. He makes a call. His voice is low, tight with frustration. Yeah, we're stuck. The crane can't get a purchase. He listens for a moment, a long silence. You want me to call who? He writes a name on a muddy notepad. Arthur Jensen. He asks for the number. An hour later, a sound drifts over the construction site. Not the whine of a modern diesel. Something lower, a rhythmic, patient chugging. A 1949 Farmall M tractor rolls into view. Its red paint is faded to a dull orange. The tires are cracked with age. At the wheel sits a man of 71. His frame is lean, his face a map of long seasons. His left sleeve is pinned neatly at the elbow. One arm. This is Arthur Jensen. The crew watches him arrive. They look at the old tractor. They look at their German-engineered crane. Some of them smirk. David, the engineer, feels a knot of doubt. This feels like a waste of time. Arthur pulls up beside the stuck piling. He doesn't say much. He gets down from the seat. He inspects the chain. He eyes the angle of the piling in the mud. He walks the ground, testing its firmness with his boot. He looks at the crane, then back at his tractor. David approaches him. Sir, I appreciate you coming out, but our machine has a max pull force of 62 kilonewtons. We can't budge it. Arthur just nods. He looks at the soft ground. Your crane is too heavy. It's digging itself a grave. My tractor is light. It sits on top of the mud, not in it. It's not about power. It's about grip. He climbs back onto the Farmall. He positions the tractor. He attaches a heavy chain to the drawbar. He takes a breath. The engine note changes, a deep, determined growl. The rear wheels begin to turn. They don't spin, they bite. Slowly, with a groan of stressed metal and sucking mud, the piling moves. It moves an inch, then a foot. Then it slides free from the clay's grip. Arthur pulls it onto solid ground. He shuts off the engine. The sudden silence is deafening. The entire crew is motionless, staring. David looks from the freed piling to the little red tractor. He looks at his $340,000 crane. He looks at the old man with one arm. He felt something he couldn't quite name. It was a feeling of fundamental miscalculation, as if his entire education had missed a crucial variable. The old man had solved a problem of modern engineering. He did it with a 72-year-old machine. He did it with half the limbs of every other man on that site. It was not the first time Arthur Jensen was told he wasn't enough. It was not the first time he proved that judgment wrong. The story of that tractor and that man is not about pulling things from the mud. It's about what we decide other people are capable of, and how quietly, how devastatingly wrong we can be. This is the kind of story we try to tell. Stories about the quiet capability that gets written off, the ones that don't make the headlines, but they build the world around us. If you believe these stories matter, subscribe to this channel, because there are more people like Arthur Jensen, and their stories need to be told. Let me tell you about what happened in 1968, because this is where the story really begins. The year is 1968. Arthur Jensen is 18 years old. 3 years earlier, a new idea Model 10 corn picker had taken his left arm. It happened in an instant, a moment of fatigue, a single mistake. His father had found him in the field. He survived, but a part of him was gone forever. Now, his father's heart was failing. The doctors said he couldn't work anymore. The farm, 160 acres of Ohio soil, rested on Arthur's shoulders. The family's old Farmall M was tired. It needed an overhaul he couldn't afford. He needed a new machine, something with more power, something with modern hydraulics. He walked into the International Harvester dealership in town. The floor was polished concrete. The air smelled of new paint and rubber. A brand new Farmall 806 sat in the center of the showroom. It was beautiful, powerful. It was the future. Mr. Henderson came out to greet him. Frank Henderson was a good man. Everyone in town said so. He coached the Little League team. He was a deacon at the Methodist Church. He served on the town council. He had a kind smile and a firm handshake. He knew Arthur's family for years. He'd sold Arthur's grandfather his first tractor. Arthur explained the situation, his father's health, the need for a more powerful tractor to work the farm alone. He wanted to buy the 806 on credit. Mr. Henderson listened patiently. He nodded in all the right places. He looked at Arthur with genuine concern. He saw the pinned-up sleeve. He saw the earnest hope in the boy's eyes, and he felt a deep, paternal sense of responsibility. He put a hand on Arthur's shoulder. "Son, I can't sell you this tractor." Arthur was confused. "Our credit is good, sir. We've never missed a payment." Frank Henderson shook his head slowly. "This isn't about money, Art." He walked Arthur over to the big tractor. He pointed to the levers. "This machine has live hydraulics, a fully independent PTO. It's a different animal than that old M you're used to. It's faster. It's stronger. It requires two good hands to operate safely, especially in a hurry, especially when you're tired." Arthur stood his ground. "I can handle it, Mr. Henderson. I know I can." The dealer's voice was soft. It was kind. And that's what made it so much worse. "I know you think you can, son, but I've been selling these machines for 30 years. I've seen what they can do. I've been to the funerals. I am not going to be the man who sells you the machine that kills you. I just can't live with that." He was not being cruel. He was not being dismissive. He was being certain. He was certain he was protecting this young man. He offered a different solution. "Let me find you a good used Farmall Cub, something smaller, safer. You could manage the chores with that, maybe rent out the crop fields." It was a kind suggestion. It was a reasonable suggestion. And it was a death sentence for the farm. Arthur felt the floor drop out from under him. It wasn't anger he felt, not contempt. It was something softer, and in some ways much worse. It was the feeling of being erased, of having his own capability decided for him by a good man who thought he knew best. He walked out of the dealership. The bell on the door chimed behind him. He didn't say another word. He went home. He found his father sitting in a chair by the window, looking out over the fields. Arthur told him what Mr. Henderson had said. He relayed the conversation word for word. The kindness, the certainty, the refusal. His father listened without interrupting. His breath was shallow. His hands rested on the arms of the chair. When Arthur finished, the room was quiet. The only sound was the ticking of a mantel clock. His father didn't look angry. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. He looked at his son, at the empty sleeve, at the despair on his young face. He spoke just a few words. His voice was a rasp, but it was firm. "They only see what's missing, son." He paused, gathering his breath. "You focus on what's left." He pointed a shaky finger toward the barn. "That old M. The engine is strong. The transmission is good. The rest is just steel. Steel can be bent. Steel can be changed." He looked back at his son. "They took everything from us in the Depression. Everything except the dirt. The dirt is enough. That tractor is enough. We will make it enough." It was not a speech. It was a statement of fact. A transfer of belief from one generation to the next. That night, something shifted in Arthur Jensen. The despair hardened into something else. Not anger, resolve. Proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind is the loneliest fight there is. It cannot be won with arguments. It can only be won with decades of work. That winter, the barn became his workshop and his laboratory. He and his father would talk for hours. His father, too weak to work, would sit on a stool wrapped in blankets. He would watch. He would offer ideas. Arthur did the work. The problem was simple to state, impossible to solve. How do you operate a clutch, a throttle, a gear shift, and a steering wheel with one hand? He couldn't afford custom parts. He couldn't afford an engineer. He had a welder his grandfather had bought. He had a pile of scrap metal behind the barn. He had his mind. He started with the clutch. It was the biggest problem. It required constant control. His right hand was needed for the steering wheel. For weeks, he sketched ideas on a piece of plywood. He tried levers. He tried hand cranks. Nothing worked. Then one day, he was rummaging through a junked 1952 Ford pickup. He saw the clutch pedal. An idea sparked. He spent a day with a cutting torch and a welder. He fabricated a bracket. He linked the Ford's pedal to the Farmall's clutch rod. He ran the linkage outside the transmission housing. He mounted the pedal on the left side of the operator's platform, where his left foot would naturally rest. He now had a foot clutch. It was crude. It was ugly, but it worked. Next, the throttle. The hand throttle was on the steering column. It was impossible to adjust while steering. He needed a way to control the engine speed without letting go of the wheel. He found an old friction lever from a hay rake. He mounted it low on the dash panel. He connected it to the governor with a long rod. He positioned it so he could nudge it with his right knee. A little pressure to increase RPMs, a little nudge back to idle down. It gave him fine control over the engine. His hand never had to leave the wheel. The steering was the final piece. Plowing a straight furrow required two hands, one to steer, one to adjust the plow depth. He couldn't do both. So he invented a simple, brutal solution. He welded a heavy steel plate to the steering column. He drilled a series of holes in it. He mounted a spring-loaded pin on the dashboard. When he had the wheels perfectly straight, he could reach over and drop the pin into a hole. It locked the steering. It would only hold for a few seconds before the tractor drifted, but a few seconds was all he needed. Enough time to reach down and adjust the plow's hydraulic lever, then pull the pin and resume steering. He worked through the cold months. His hands were raw. He burned himself on the welder. He busted his knuckles with a slipping wrench. But every day, the machine became more his own. It was no longer just a Farmall M. It was an extension of his body, a solution crafted from steel and will. By the time the snow melted, it was ready. He had built a tractor that one man with one arm could operate. Not just operate, farm with, effectively. His father sat on the porch and watched him drive it out of the barn for the first time. He didn't smile. He just nodded. The certainty in his eyes was a match for the certainty of Frank Henderson, but it was a different kind of certainty. It was faith. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, by a friend, by a parent, a teacher, a boss, someone who genuinely believed they were protecting you from failure, someone who saw your limits more clearly than they saw your potential. How do you fight that? You can't argue with it. You can't get angry at it. You just have to go out and do the work. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to prove that kind of certainty wrong. Because what Arthur Jensen did next wasn't for Mr. Henderson. It wasn't for the neighbors. It was for the quiet belief his father had placed in him. It was for the dirt under his feet. That spring, Arthur was in the fields. The modified Farmall M chugged away, pulling a 3-bottom plow. He was slower than his neighbors. They had their new John Deere 402s, their new International 806s. They could plow a field in a day that took Arthur 2. But he was working, from sunup to sundown. His furrows were straight. His planting depth was perfect. The community watched, and it divided. At the grain co-op, the talk was pessimistic. He's a good kid, works hard, but he can't keep up. That old tractor will kill him before the bank does. It's a shame what happened to his father. The farm will be sold by year's end. This was the conventional wisdom. It was logical. It was based on experience, but it was wrong. Then there were the others, the quiet supporters. An older farmer named George Miller stopped by one afternoon. Miller was a veteran. He'd seen Normandy. He didn't say much. He just looked at the modifications on the Farmall. He touched the welded foot pedal. He grunted. "Brought you a spare carburetor. From my old H. Should fit." Arthur tried to thank him. Miller just waved him off. "Don't you listen to those old hens at the co-op. They measure a man by the color of his paint. You just keep that engine running." It was a small gesture, but it felt like a lifeline. And then there was the witness, Mr. Frank Henderson. He would drive the county roads on his way to make sales calls. He would always pass the Jensen farm. He would see Arthur out in the field on the old M, a tiny red dot in a sea of brown earth. He would slow his car. He would watch the boy work. And he felt something. Not pity, not regret. He felt a confirmation of his own good judgment. He saw the boy struggling. He saw the slow pace. He saw the old machine. He told himself, "I did the right thing." That new tractor would have been too much for him. I protected him. He would drive on, secure in his kindness, secure in his certainty. He had no idea he was watching the beginning of a quiet revolution. He didn't understand what he was seeing. He saw a boy with one arm on an old tractor. He didn't see a man with no debt. He didn't see a mind that could re-engineer the world to fit him. He didn't see the power of focusing on what was left. The first few years were lean. Arthur worked the 160 acres. He repaired the tractor himself. He learned every bolt, every gasket. He babied the engine. He saved every penny. He didn't buy a new truck. He didn't fix up the house. Every dollar went back into the farm, or into the bank. By 1972, he walked into that bank. He paid off the farm's mortgage, in full. The banker was shocked. Farms weren't being paid off. They were being leveraged. Arthur just nodded. He took the deed. He was 22 years old. He owned the farm free and clear. Cash. That same year, his neighbor's farm went up for sale. 40 acres. Arthur bought it. Cash. He was still using the modified M. His neighbors laughed. But they weren't laughing at the co-op. Arthur's yields per acre were consistently 10% higher than the county average. Because he was careful, he didn't rush. He managed his soil with a devotion the big operators couldn't match. He had no equipment loans, no seed loans, no operating notes. His cost of production was a fraction of theirs. The rhythm of his life was set. Work, save, expand. 1978. An adjoining 80-acre parcel came available. Arthur bought it. Cash. He was still driving the Farmall M. He had designed and built his own planter, a custom rig that he could operate with his unique set of controls. It was more precise than anything you could buy from a dealer. 1985. The farm crisis hit America's heartland. Commodity prices collapsed. Interest rates soared. Farmers who were leveraged to the hilt went under. The men who had bought the big new tractors. The men who had laughed at Arthur's old M. Their farms were on the auction block. It was a tragedy. Arthur watched it happen. He felt for his neighbors. But he was solvent. He had no debt. He had cash in the bank. He went to the auctions. He bought 2 more farms. For pennies on the dollar. Cash. Mr. Henderson saw the sale notices in the local paper. He saw the name, Arthur Jensen, purchaser of the old Miller farm. Arthur Jensen, purchaser of the Smithfield place. He sat at his desk in the dealership. A strange feeling crept over him, the first flicker of doubt. It was a cold, unfamiliar sensation. He pushed it away. The boy got lucky, he told himself. That's all. 1995. Arthur Jensen was 45 years old. He now owned over 600 acres, all of it paid for. Cash. He finally bought a second tractor, a used 4-wheel drive Steiger. He needed it for the heavy tillage, but the Farmall M was still his primary machine. He used it for planting, for cultivating, for all the delicate work. It was like an old friend, an extension of his will. By 2005, he farmed 1,200 acres. He had diversified into a small vineyard. He was a legend at the co-op now. The old men who had doubted him were retired or gone. The young farmers came to him for advice. They didn't ask about tractors. They asked about balance sheets, about soil health, about surviving the bad years. He would just tell them, don't buy what you can't afford, and take care of your dirt. He never mentioned Mr. Henderson. He never spoke of the day he was refused. He didn't need to. His life was the rebuttal. Every acre he owned, every bushel he sold, every dollar he saved. It was a quiet, 30-year argument against the danger of well-meaning certainty. And the final word had not yet been spoken. The year is 2010. The International Harvester dealership is now a Case IH dealership. But it's still in the same building, still has the same polished concrete floor. Frank Henderson is long retired. He spends his winters in Florida. His son, Tom, runs the business now. And the business is failing. 2 bad years in a row. A big new dealership opened up on the highway. Tom Henderson is over-leveraged. The bank is calling his notes. He is weeks away from losing everything his father built. He is desperate. He drives out to Arthur Jensen's farm. He finds Arthur in the workshop, tinkering with the engine of the old Farmall M. Tom is nervous. He and Arthur are not friends. They are acquaintances. Men who nod at each other in the feed store. Tom explains the situation. He lays it all out. The debt, the competition, the bank. He asks Arthur for a loan, or to co-sign on a line of credit from the bank. He says, I know it's a lot to ask, but my father always spoke of your family with respect. Arthur listens. He wipes his hand on a rag. He is quiet for a long time. He looks at Tom Henderson. He sees the same earnest eyes he saw in the father 42 years earlier. He sees the same fear. He doesn't say yes. He doesn't say no. He says something else. Your father was a good man. He always tried to do the right thing. He thought he was protecting me that day. Tom nods, relieved. Yes, Arthur holds up a hand, silencing him. But he wasn't protecting me. He was protecting himself. From the possibility that he could be wrong. He let his idea of me be more real than me. There is a profound silence in the workshop, broken only by the ticking of a cooling engine. Tom Henderson finally understands. He understands the depth of the insult his father had delivered. An insult wrapped in kindness. An insult that took 4 decades to answer. He expects Arthur to tell him to leave, but Arthur doesn't. He looks at the younger man's desperation. He sees a chance to close a circle. I won't co-sign your loan. The bank owns you then. Arthur walks over to a desk. He pulls out a checkbook. I will buy your debt from the bank. I will become your lender. You will answer to me. He wrote a check, for the full amount, cash. He handed it to Tom. Now go back there and run that business. Just run it better. And from now on, when a young farmer comes in asking for a chance, you listen to them. You don't look at what's missing. You look at what's there. Tom Henderson took the check. He couldn't speak. He just nodded. He walked out of that workshop a different man. He was no longer the owner of his business, but for the first time, he understood what it meant to build one. Arthur Jensen never married. He never had children of his own. Some might say his life was a lonely one, spent with machines and dirt, but they would be wrong. They would be looking at what was missing. His legacy was not one of blood, it was one of opportunity. In 2012, he established the Jensen Foundation. Its first act was to create the One-Arm Scholarship at the local community college. It was for students entering agricultural programs, mechanics, engineering, agronomy, with a special preference for students with physical disabilities. The first recipient was a young woman who had lost a leg in a car accident. She went on to design a new kind of prosthetic, one specifically for operating heavy farm equipment. She now runs her own company. Arthur also began to mentor young farmers. He would invite them to his farm. He wouldn't teach them how to plow. He would teach them how to think. He'd show them his balance sheets, decades of handwritten ledgers. See this? He'd say. This is your freedom. No debt. No one can tell you what to do. No one can tell you what you can't do. The dealership, under Tom Henderson's management and Arthur's silent ownership, changed. It became known for something unique. It had the best custom fabrication shop in the state. If a farmer had a disability, they would re-engineer a machine to fit them. Hand controls for a paraplegic, specialized lifts for a farmer in a wheelchair, foot clutches for a young man who had lost an arm. They were building the solutions that Arthur had to invent for himself in a cold barn. Mr. Henderson passed away in 2015. In his final years, he never spoke of Arthur Jensen. But his son said he used to keep a newspaper clipping in his desk. A small article from the local paper about the One-Arm Scholarship. He never commented on it. He just kept it. A quiet witness to the very end. Arthur's impact rippled outward. He didn't just build a farm, he built a system of belief. A belief in capability. A belief that the most important work is proving that a kind person can be completely wrong about you. His life became a quiet lesson, written in the furrows of 1,200 acres of Ohio soil. A lesson that took a lifetime to write. Which brings us back to that construction site. The year 2021. The 40-ton piling sits on dry ground. The crew from the construction company is gathered around the old Farmall M. They are touching it, as if it were a holy relic. The young engineer, David, runs his hand over the crude foot pedal welded to the frame. He touches the knee throttle lever. He looks at the pin lock on the steering column. He sees not just a machine, he sees a story. A lifetime of innovation born from necessity. He asks Arthur about it. "How did you come up with this?" Arthur Jensen just pats the faded red hood of the tractor. The metal is warm from the engine. He looks at the young man, and he says the words his father told him all those years ago. They only see what's missing. You focus on what's left. The tractor sits there in the mud, a 72-year-old machine. It is a physical artifact of a single, powerful idea. That limitations are not a verdict. They are a design challenge. That crane was worth $340,000. It was built with the best of modern technology, computers and sensors and hydraulic schematics from 3 different countries. It saw a problem it could not solve. Arthur Jensen, with his one arm and his ancient tractor, saw something different. He didn't see a 40-ton problem. He saw a simple question of leverage, a question of grip. He saw the fundamentals. The most dangerous limitation is the one imposed on you by someone who genuinely believes they are protecting you. Certainty about another person's capabilities, delivered with kindness, is a cage built with the best intentions. It cannot be fought with anger. It can only be disproven. With decades of quiet, relentless work. Right now, somewhere in the world, a good person is telling someone what they can't do, based on what they see, based on their experience, based on their certainty. This story is for the person who is being told they are not enough. If this story means something to you, subscribe to this channel. We are dedicated to finding the stories that prove the doubters wrong. Comment below with a time someone underestimated you and what you did about it. And share this video with one person who needs to be reminded that what's left is always, always enough.